Surrender isn't about selling everything and moving to Africa. It is about selling your heart so that you're willing to move in whatever way the Lord may lead. Welcome to the Q4 Impact Podcast, where through scripture, story, and conversation, we inspire you to make an impact all the way through the fourth quarter of your life. Thanks for joining Ron and me today, and we are also joined by a very special guest. In today's episode, we are going to be highlighting what can happen when God's work and the details of our everyday lives intersect with a heart that is fully surrendered to Him. Ron, will you please introduce Tom for everyone?
What a privilege it is. Welcome. Tom is a dear, dear friend and was my dentist and got his education at UC Berkeley and then went on to get his doctorate at UC San Francisco. So, Tom, one of the parts of your story that I think is really interesting to me, that I think will start our conversation out with, is that you had kind of your direction in life pretty set at a pretty early time. Tell me a little bit about that. What was that like for you?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to be a dentist when I was 13 years old, and people think that I'm kind of crazy. Why would a 13-year-old ever want to be a dentist? But, that was a dream that God gave me, and actually that kind of came up from the difficult immigrant life that we started here when we moved here when I was 10 years old. And, I saw my parents work really hard and long hours. They work 6 days a week. And then, of course, Sunday was church day. We spent all day on Sunday and then the whole week start over again. And many times in those important moments in my life, they weren't able to take time off for work. So I really wanted to strive for something, a career where it would actually give me some success and financial freedom. And so somehow God led me to wanting to be a dentist. And so from age 13, I literally methodically planned my whole life around reaching that personal goal.
Did you meet like a dentist when you were that age? Like how? I don't even know if I had been to a dentist at age 13. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing is that was during my junior high school years. And, back then we did some sort of a very rudimentary personality test and kind of spit out a list of 10 possible careers that actually match my personality. And so that really actually got me thinking about what do I really want to be when I grow up? And, one of the things that I realized, and again, this is kind of crazy, but at age 13, my personality, the way I was wired, I'm like, I cannot see myself working in a corporate world. And so, going in a company, working under somebody, that was just something that I just couldn't imagine myself doing. So first thing was that I wanted to be a leader or someone that would actually, be my own boss. I wanted to be my own boss and call my own shots. And then, as I share with you, the time issue was very important. And, when I saw these careers where, it demanded a lot of time and the control over time was lacking. And so I just saw dentistry as a really perfect career for me. So I began to pursue that.
So you went to college and then you had to get your doctorate and then you met this amazingly beautiful woman and you guys got married. And I'm going to go through the story quickly, but I'm going to get to the point and where you shared that after, I think you said about 25 years, you said something about a blank piece of paper. If you would have had a blank piece of paper, tell the audience that story.
Yeah, well, actually, it was not 25 years. Actually, when I reached about 45, most people, that's kind of at the peak of your career. And, once I got there and I fulfill all the goals that I set for myself. And to be honest with you, if God gave me a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper with a pen at age 25 and said, "Hey, Tom, here is a piece of paper. I want you to write everything that you ever wanted in life." And if I wrote that down at age 25, by the time I reached 45, God had blessed me so much that everything that I've ever wanted, I was living it at that moment.
That is so amazing. So when you recognized that at 45, all of your goals had been met, what did you do with that? What did that stir in you? Was it excitement? Was it thankfulness? Was it like, what now, Lord?
Yeah, actually, it was thankfulness, absolutely, because I mean, how blessed was I to have all my dreams come true? My career, my family life, my marriage life. It was just literally, I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more. But once I got there, as I told you, I'm a planner, and I got hiking up this mountain that you've and striving for that goal all your life. And once you get to the peak of that mountain, you ask yourself, okay, I'm here, now what? And that was the same question that I asked myself, what's next? And I think I really did a lot of introspection, asking God, what's next for me? And I realized that I really didn't have a purpose in my life. And at that time, the only answer that I can give myself will be, well, now, I mean, I guess I can keep working, continue to pursue my career, make more money, buy a bigger home. I don't know, buy a nicer car. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but, then at a certain point, God will come look down from heaven and say, "Hey, buddy, your time's up." And I go to heaven, and I was asking myself, wow, is that all to my life? And I really started to sense this feeling of emptiness, I guess. And so I really asked God, please, Lord, give me a higher purpose. Why did you give me life? Why did you give me, this mind, the gift of dentistry? There has to be a higher purpose than the life that I'm living now. Yeah.
So I've heard you describe this before as almost like a holy discontentment. So maybe give us a little more detail, like how discontented, how troubled were you? Was it just kind of a thing that you thought of every couple of weeks, or was it kind of getting more intense as the days or the weeks went by?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I was like terribly sad or depressed about, because you're like surrounded by God's blessing. But it was definitely, I guess, like the best way I could describe it would be, I felt kind of lost. I was lost, and I was searching, and that search began to be more intense as time went by. And so, in God's perfect timing, my cousin gave me a book called Halftime. And I read that book, and I highly recommend it for your audience. I read that book, and if I can summarize that book in one sentence, it would be, if the first half is a quest for success, the second half is a quest for significance. And so I read that book from cover to cover. I mean, like, I would just basically devoured it, and I really started to get a sense of, where and how God was kind of leading me to lean more towards, how can I give back to the Lord? How can we serve people? And at that time, God brought in a very interesting man into my life. He was one of my patients, and we're having this dentist to patient conversation like you see in the Hollywood movies, where the dentist has his finger in his mouth and is asking these really deep, meaningful conversations. And I remember sharing with him, at that time, my son was really doing well in school, and I was just a proud father. And I was telling him, hey, my son is doing this, and that. And, he got up And he asked me this profound question. He cut through all that smoke screen and asked me, so tell me, what is your son's spiritual life like? And so that just kind of like took me back. Most people will just say, hey, that's nice. I'm so happy for you. You must be proud of your son. And just kind of, go that direction. But, he kind of cut to the, asked that really core question. And it just kind of, I was like, wow, this guy's had a very interesting person. And so I asked him to have breakfast with me. And after that conversation, I knew that he was a follower of Jesus. And as the more I learned about him, the more I wanted to live that life. And so I asked him to be my mentor, and we started to have Tuesday morning breakfast on a regular basis. And that person ended up being a gentleman by the name of Ron Regenstrife. My role model.
I heard he's a great guy.
He's a great guy. My role model, my hero. And I tell him every time I meet him that when I grow up, I want to be just like him. Yeah. And at that time he was sharing me about how through his involvement with Children Hunger Fund and Johnny and Friends, he was going on these short-term mission trips. And, when I heard that, my heart just like jumped up. I leaped out, and I'm like, you know what? That's it. That's the kind of work that I want to do. That's the direction that I want to go to in search of that significance in my life. So that's how I think God stirred in my heart to, seek God for his real purpose in my life.
I love it. And it all started with a man in a dentist chair, which is just so fun that God uses the dailiness in our lives to begin to work his purpose. So fast forwarding a little bit, I know you and your wife were then praying your 25th anniversary, and God used that event to begin to unfold your life in a different direction. Can you share now a little bit about what happened and that stirring that occurred?
Absolutely. So right around that time, we were celebrating our 25th anniversary, and I was actually turning 50. So it was a significant year and a milestone for us. So I wanted to plan a trip that we will remember for the rest of our life. And so I proposed climbing the Kilimanjaro. Of course, we'll remember that trip, but I think maybe in a bad way. So my wife just said, absolutely not. We're not climbing the Kilimanjaro for our anniversary trip. And so I went back to the drawing boards. I started to do more research, and I came back with another proposal, 2 weeks in Africa for a safari. And so that was, something that interested my wife. So Lita approved. So I started to plan for that trip. And right around that time, a gentleman from Rwanda came to our church, and he shared his testimony about his survival through the genocide in 1994 and how God and his faith in him carried him through. And so as we heard that testimony, one of the testimony that he had was, when he was hiding in his house when the killers came. And through a small peak hole, he saw his father and sister get murdered right in front of his eyes. And so instantaneously, he became an orphan. And, with the support of Compassion International and just the people around him, he was able to go to a university. And as a university student, he started a small nonprofit to help support street children that reminded of him years ago. And one time, a small young boy came asking for help. And when he saw that boy, he realized that he was the son of the man that murdered his father and his sister. And at that moment, he received that boy, forgave his father, and loved that boy and put him through school. And now he's a university graduate working as an electrical engineer. And so when we heard that testimony of forgiveness and love, we were just I was blown away. And at that time, that exact moment, I heard a little whisper from the Lord right from behind my ear. And I heard him speak to me, I blessed you so much. I've given you everything you've ever wanted. And now you're celebrating this milestone. And I am nowhere in the picture. I'm like, there's something wrong with that. I'm the blesser. I'm the giver of that blessing. And I need to be in the middle of that celebration. And so I just heard another voice kind of nudging me to go to Africa, not in this fancy safari trip, but to an orphanage somewhere and to use my gift and talent as a dentist to serve children in Africa as a Thanksgiving offering to the Lord for our 25th wedding anniversary.
So how did Lita respond to this second idea?
So yeah, great question. So the second idea, I'm like, okay, this is going to be really, really challenging. I have to ask her now to, go to a medical mission trip for our anniversary. So I'm waiting for that right moment when she's in that perfect mood to pop the question. And one night we're on our way back from church and she looked at me and she asked me, hey, Tom, would you consider going on a mission trip for our anniversary trip this summer? And I was just like completely shocked and blown away. And I was just like, how can this be? And so I was so excited that she took that burden off of me having to convince her about the trip. And as I was kind of like losing my mind, she kind of looked at me and said, you know what, Tom, I need you to calm down and let's wait for God's confirmation. This could be, again, our human minds trying to do something good. And if this is truly from the Lord, He's going to confirm our decision. So let's wait for that confirmation. And so I said, of course, let's wait for that and then we can move forward with it. 10 minutes later, I get a phone call from a doctor from our church. And he asked me, this is like almost a quote. He asked me, hey, Tom, would you guys consider going to Africa for 2 weeks on a summer medical mission trip this year? And so I'm like, gotta be kidding me. So that's how God confirmed our first trip to Africa. I mean, how much more clear can that confirmation be? And so we just immediately said yes, and we started to plan for the mission trip that year.
So did something then happen on that first trip that you took? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we went and, we were enjoying our life, the American dream. Now, God asked us to go to this short-term mission trip. So, of course, we say yes. And, our expectation was that we're going to go there and do our 2-week thing. We're going to come back home, go back to our life, and continue enjoying life. So we thought that on our last day of clinic, we were at this remote village, maybe about 4 hours outside of the capital city. I was able to treat a young mom, and she came in with a severe dental infection, bordering on a medical emergency. She has not eaten in 3 days. She had fever and chills, just signs of the infection kind of spreading throughout her body. And so I immediately helped her, treated her, gave her some antibiotics. Right at the end of that treatment, God made me realize that, if God didn't send us from the San Fernando Valley all the way to this remote village in Rwanda that exact moment, this young woman could have died from a dental infection. And so that reality really hit me. And, realizing that God can use these hands that I was using to pursue success and financial gain, to use that to save a young mom's life and to be able to use that to save souls if I came back as a missionary to Rwanda. That was just really a profound impact. And when I heard that voice from the Lord, it took me 2 seconds to say yes. And so we returned from that trip knowing that God was calling us back to Rwanda as a long-term missionary.
So, wow, let me make sure I understand this. So, last day of the trip, until you saw that woman in the chair, you still were kind of thinking this was a short-term thing. And then you have this encounter. And so was this some like immediate, like that moment you and Lita decided, you're going to want to do this full time, or was there more of a process that took place?
Yes. Actually, before I saw that woman, during that whole week, I felt this stir in my heart. I was feeling this weird sensation, and that weird sensation was like, I think God is leading me back here for a longer term than a short term. So I was actually praying to the Lord, if this is from you, please confirm what I'm sensing in my heart. And so that encounter with the young mom was his answer to my prayer of confirming this voice that I'm hearing from you. And so, of course, I said yes immediately in my heart. We read in the Bible about Jesus calling his disciples. And when he told Peter to follow me, the Bible said he immediately got up and followed him. And for me, in my heart, when I heard that voice from the Lord, it was an immediate yes. Of course, when you go there, when you're in a short-term mission trip with absolutely no plans of going back, there's a lot of sorting out to do in your life to actually, make that transition. And so after we came back, it was a 7-year process of, making that transition. And, when, how, I had no idea. And so again, it was a prayerful transition where we were just asking God, even the timing, when is the right time? I have no idea. And so God continued to confirm those decisions for me step by step.
So I'm wondering, thanks. I'm wondering, you had that immediate yes because of how the Lord had prepared you, it sounds like, and you and Lita were in agreement. But over 7 years, did you ever encounter reservations or uncertainty about the things that you were hearing? And I heard you say the Lord kept confirming, but there had to have been some obstacles, I think even internally, if I put myself in your shoes, to have to overcome over a 7-year period of preparation. What was that like?
Yeah, I think, again, the timing is like, Lord, I don't know when to go. When is the right time? Do I go next month? So I'm asking Lord for guidance. And in the midst of that, I think for us, for all of us, and one of the biggest concern would be our finances. Imagine you go through financial planning when you're in your 20s or 30s. Everything's all set in place and you're kind of following this plan. And then Lord says, hey, we're going to cut that short 10, 15 years. You're going to go to Rwanda. And, of course, that was a big concern for me. And so there was a moment in my life where I was just crunching out numbers and thinking to myself, when I get this financial number thing all in place, then I feel comfortable enough to go. And so there was a moment where my wife was getting some spiritual training up in Seattle. And that weekend I was staying home. And God just placed a really, really deep burden in my heart to go pray. And so I threw a box of water in my car. I drove up to a Christian conference center up in the mountains. And I spent about a day and a half fasting and praying to the Lord. And during that time of prayer, I just heard from the Lord, He kind of smiled at me. I saw his face. He had a very soft smile and speaks to me like, hey, you still don't trust me, don't you? And I said, of course, Lord, I don't trust you. At that time, I was still crunching out those numbers. And he kind of smiled at me and said, trust me. Just go back home and prepare yourself so that when I tell you to go, you'll be prepared to leave for Rwanda. And, that was just a gentle, caring voice from the Lord, not in a condemning way, like, how can you not trust me? But just like a father would care for his son. And so I heard that. And when I picked my wife up from the airport, I shared that story. And we both agreed that, when we hear the voice from the Lord to go, that we will pick up and go. And, the question is, when do you know that God is telling us to go? And we're both struggling with finding that right doctor to kind of take over my practice. Someone that's a, follower of Jesus who is going to care and treat my patients that I left dearly for, 30 years to continue that care. And so Lita and I, we both agreed that, hey, once God sends a doctor into my life, that'll be a clear sign for us to leave. And of course, a guy named Ron Regenstrife comes to the rescue again. And so through his connection, we were able to meet a dentist that was like the perfect doctor. And so once we got connected with him, we knew that, God answered our prayer for giving us the clear sign. And then we started to make plans to make our transition to Rwanda.
Wow. I love so many parts of this story. I love the details. I love the time it took, your carefulness to allow the confirmation process to take place. And it's really something. Of course, I know the end of the story, but the audience probably doesn't. So now it's 2020, I believe, and you head off to Rwanda, and there's so many more details to this story that I think I'm going to skip over to get to the point where we say, Tom, so you've been there now about 3 years, is that correct? And can you just describe what's happened in those 3 years since you arrived?
Yeah, one of the things that I want to share with your audience is that, when we talk about our faith journey, I think Johnny Erickson Todd put it the best that I can relate to. She says faith isn't the ability to believe long and far into the future. It's simply taking God at his word and taking the next step. And so, when I said yes at that moment in the village, I really had no idea what that meant. All I knew that God was calling me to Rwanda, and I said yes, and I took that first step. And now we're looking back after 3 years being there. It's just been an amazing journey. As you know, Ron, the audience doesn't know, but we've built 3 clinics. Our first clinic, we're serving almost 10,000 patients per year. Through that clinic, we're going out on, this year we went on over 45 outreaches into the villages with portable equipment, just sharing the gospel and just seeing people's lives get changed, and people are receiving healing, salvation. It's just been an amazing journey. And this year we were able to, in faith, we bought a building, 3-story building, where we will be establishing a training center. And that training center will bring in young Rwandan doctors that we can train clinically. we can also disciple them to be disciple makers. And it's going to be a process of multiplication, just as Jesus selected 12 disciples and then they were disciple makers and so on and so forth. And now we're filled with billions of disciples of Jesus, and that's the same kind of recipe that we're following, raising up Rwandan dentists to be disciple makers and even long-term missionaries to reach the unreached people of Africa through his hands on Africa. So it's just been an amazing journey. People ask me, like, how can you give all that up and do that? And you know what? Jesus says, I'm the good shepherd, and my shepherd recognized my voice, and they follow me. And, when I heard that voice from the Lord, and I knew 100% that was a calling from Jesus, as a follower of Jesus, like, what else can you do? I mean, you have to follow that voice, And I go to work in Rwanda, and many times I have a hard time believing that I'm actually doing what I'm doing, and it feels like a dream. And so sometimes I have to pinch myself, slap myself a few times, trying to make sure that I'm not living in this dream. And sure enough, this is real. This is reality. And once in a great while, my heart is just full of joy. It's just so overwhelming that I don't know what to do with that. It's just so overwhelming. And, before this whole journey began, I thought this happiness and joy would be fulfilled through my pursuit of success. And you know what? This joy that I'm feeling as I'm fulfilling God's purpose in my life is infinitely greater. And it's incomparable to the joy that I was feeling as I was pursuing success. So it's just been an amazing adventure. Again, following step by step, because I don't know what that next step looks like. But as we follow His voice and take the step of faith, God continues to open these doors beyond our imagination, and we're just blessed to be part of God's plan and purpose in our life.
So before Susan takes us to the close of our time with you, Tom, I want to make sure that you don't leave out the fact that going from Simi Valley, California to Rwanda, the country of Rwanda, has also brought a number of difficulties. And it hasn't just been, from smooth thing to smooth thing, that there are, as part of these last years, I know there's just been struggle and challenge. And just give us a minute or so about that, what you would say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We are called disciples of Jesus, and we are called to take up the cross, deny ourselves, take up the cross, and follow Him. And in the process of leaving to Rwanda, there's a lot of things that we have to leave behind. And I think as a son, as parents, we thought now that our children are grown up, that they can take care of themselves and we can pursue God's calling in our life. But I think the more and more we spend time in Rwanda, the more we realize that, our children, even though they're all grown up, they still need parents in their life. They still need a home that they can come back to during Thanksgiving and, have mom's home cooking. And, when they're having challenges or difficulties in their life, a place they can come back and heal and be comforted. But, being thousands and thousands of miles away, we're unable to do that. And so it's been a painful journey of experiencing that separation and loss, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And, recently we became grandparents, and, not being able to see our grandson except for like few weeks, one year at a time. That's been difficult, and so there's so many things that we have to leave behind. And I share that with some of our missionary friends in Rwanda, and we all look at each other in the eye, and we tell ourselves and comfort ourselves, saying that that's a cross that we have to bear. That's a cross that we have to bear to live out our calling as the disciple of Jesus, and to fulfill, His purpose in my life. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what you and I have interacted only briefly, not the years of friendship that you and Ron have shared, but what comes across so clearly in our conversation today and in those few times I've met you is just the humility and the posture of surrender before the Lord that allows you to count it as joy in these sufferings and in the loss. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for modeling what it looks like to live that life of surrender and to trust God's leading, as He so gently reminded you to trust Him. So this is a story where your act of surrender did take you to Africa, but it's really not about Africa. I know in Christian circles, sometimes we joke about that. Like, if I follow the Lord, He's going to send me to Africa. And it's not that. But what it is surrender isn't about selling everything and moving to Africa. It is about selling your heart so that you're willing to move in whatever way the Lord may lead. And ultimately, it's being willing to hold loosely to what God has blessed you with and to follow His call on your life. So Tom, thank you for you and Lita both being willing to do that and to share your story with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan and Ron, for allowing me to share a little bit about our journey to your audience. I just pray that it's not our story, it's actually God's story. It's Jesus' story. And I hope this story will encourage all of them to continue that pursuit of living out God's divine purpose in their life. Thank you.
Thank you. So in case you missed it, the organization that Tom and Lita started is a nonprofit called His Hands on Africa. You can find them at hishandsonafrica.org, and we're also going to list that in the show notes in case you're interested in learning more about how you could support their ministry that is, well, I've never seen anything like it. Every time I watch a video, it brings me to tears, and it's tears of joy. So as we wrap up today, Ron and I are also going to be building next week on this topic of surrender as it pertains to finding your own personal why, just as Tom and Lita have in finding their life's purpose in this latter half of their lives. And we are excited about next week as well, because it's going to be our 50th episode, which is hard to believe. So thank you to our listeners for supporting us, for helping us get this far. And as you know, Q4 Impact was founded from a passion to encourage followers of Christ to live with purpose and impact, just as we've heard in the story today. And so we can't think of a better topic than what we have planned next week that highlights how to actually go about doing that. We hope you'll join us. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Q4 Impact Podcast. To continue receiving encouragement and practical tips on how to live with purpose and meaning through the many changes and challenges of life, please be sure to subscribe. And please share it with others you think may also benefit.